This is a download from the BBC. To find out more and for our terms of use, please go to bbc.co.uk. Hello. This week, the thriller in Manila. The radio drama A Kidnapping captured the approval of many listeners. But did it have to be recorded in the Philippines, and at what cost?
It's our licence fee money, and hearing that it's on location is like having your own money waved in your face.
The play's director, John Dryden, tries to convince sceptical listeners that recording in far-flung locations can make artistic and financial sense. Also...
Now, just in case you hadn't realised it, you're listening to 5 Live, the BBC's 24-hour national news and sport network. Launched at 5 this morning amid a blaze of publicity.
5 Live is 20 years old this week, and though Eddie Mair has moved away to Radio 4, Peter Allen, another member of the original presenting team, has never left. He joins us with his recollections of working at the UK's first 24-hour rolling news and sports station.
Though I'd been a journalist for so many years, radio and television and newspapers, I'd never done anything quite like that. And I remember coming out of the studio feeling as if I'd been sandbagged.
And as its controller announces he's sailing off into the sunset, we join Radio 3 down by the riverside to discover why the station set up a pop-up studio on the south bank of the Thames.
It's going to be quite strange going back to a lonely studio and broadcasting house. I shall have to bring some of these very nice audience members with me.
More from Sean Rafferty et al. Later. But first, the unarmed combat, that is, a Today programme political interview.
You're saying there's a cap, but
limit.
Actually the government can change the cap as soon as it wants
the rules
by simply getting a vote of its majority
if you want
in the
to change
House of Commons.
it,
you have to get a vote of your MPs, which is obviously
that's
not
in the
very
rules,
difficult.
and we don't want to do that.
Now, politicians who go on the Today programme know that they're unlikely to be given an easy ride, let alone take a breath. The programme prides itself on its presenters' rigorous and robust interviewing style. But for many listeners, Evan Davis's interview with the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Iain Duncan Smith, on Wednesday went way over the top. They want a lot less heat and a lot more light.
It's David Morse. I'm calling from Hamhor Island in Shepperton. I want to register my strong objections to the increasing trend of interviewers to what I can only describe as pouncing on politicians' replies to questions mid-sentence, as evidenced in Evan Davies' interview with Iain Duncan Smith on the Today programme on Wednesday.
The government said they were controlling
you're saying
welfare,
there's a cap,
and it
and in
ballooned
fact
by
you're saying that the
70%,
first...
but the public were told...
I hold no brief for politicians, but by constantly pouncing, it was made almost impossible to hear what was being said by either.
I believe we will,
Would you
but we
under
need
the-
to do it in a
under
way
the
that the policies
definitions-
we put forward actually do it.
So frustrating. Would you do it...
I'm Jill Beckett and I'm from Mayfield in West Yorkshire. Evan was constantly interrupting and both were talking at the same time. What a dreadful way to conduct a serious interview.
Yeah, and they haven't said that. So
Well,
what we're
let's
getting
take
is
another-
nothing
let's
from
take-
them,
let's not
whereas
look-
we are in the budget. It's very important. But Devon, you
Okay,
didn't
no,
ask
look,
this
let me
question
ask
to
you
her
another
earlier. It is
question.
very, very important.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm David Osgood from Gloucestershire. Today is an excellent programme and has some excellent presenters, but why does Evan Davis have to be so interruptive in his interviewing?
I'm trying to understand.
Well, let me
If
give you an
disability
example.
benefit- well, let me take my
give you an
example. Let me
because you
take
asked
my.
me a
Let me
question.
ask you my example.
I know his hobby horse is finance, but he is not the plenipotentiary of all solvable problems. Why do editors not give him some advice on his repeatedly interruptive style?
Well, David, we'll try to find out the answer to that and many other listeners' questions in a few weeks' time, when today's editor, Jamie Angus, comes on to feedback. In the meantime, the programme has sent us this statement.
Evan pressed Iain Duncan Smith where he felt it was necessary, within the time constraints, to get the most pertinent answers and to move the interview along on a detailed and complex subject.
Do tell us what you think of today and that very brief statement, and I'll put your questions to editor Jamie Angus in a few weeks. The boss of Radio 3, Roger Wright, announced this week that he's leaving the corporation to take up the prestigious but undoubtedly less controversial job of director of the Aldborough Festival. He's been controller for the last 15 years, and for the last 7 has combined the role with that of director of the Proms. I'd like to tell you who his likely successor is and whether the two jobs will continue to be twinned, but I haven't a clue. Potential candidates should hurry down to the south bank of the River Thames in London, because for the last 2 weeks, Radio 3 has been operating a pop-up studio in the Royal Festival Hall's Riverside Cafe, where listeners have been able to watch presenters and live performers from dawn to almost midnight. I am not a candidate for the controllership, despite my obvious credentials, such as my grade 3 piano. But I couldn't resist the temptation to pop down to take a look at the pop-up studio with Radio 3 in-tune presenter Sean Rafferty, accompanied by the music of Charles Limburger and the Budapest Gypsy Orchestra.
It's wonderful. We've got a pop-up studio which looks like a very, very large TARDIS. It's a lovely bright shade of red, and the Gypsy Orchestra are in front, and I'm going to sit outside. I can retreat to the studio. People throw buns at me, but so far that hasn't happened. The wirings and the bits and pieces and the producer and the technicians behind, and the music has been wafted outside onto the terraces as well.
But when you start at 3:30, you're going to be outside that booth, you're going to be with the orchestra. Do you feel a little exposed?
Yes, but I've got used to it now. I quite like it. It's going to be quite strange going back to a lonely studio and broadcasting house. I shall have to bring some of these very nice audience members with me.
We thought we'd come down and listen tonight to In Tune. You know, it's a bit more buzzy and you feel included and part of it.
I've come to see Radio 3 in action and to hear the Gypsy Orchestra, which I think will be most entertaining.
I've now come up to the 4th floor of the festival hall to meet Jessica Isaacs, who's the editor of In Tune and who is wearing headphones. Why, Jessica?
Well, I'm actually listening to Afternoon 3, which is live on air at the moment. People down there in the studio space, they're sitting there with their headphones on, watching things happening, but listening at the same time.
Do you have a problem with that outside space? Because people are walking past, they're getting cups of coffee, they're sitting down. Do the microphones pick up a lot of extraneous noise?
No, I think what's interesting is that when we're here, we feel we've got so many people who are coming to see the programme, which is wonderful. Because we've got excellent technical team, when you're listening on air, you hear a burble, but everything is clear. So I was listening to Julian Lloyd-Webber yesterday, and I could hear it. I mean, it felt like it wasn't excluding for the listeners, but we are here at the same time, and I think that's the balance.
And do you have opportunities when you come away from the studio like this to do audience research, both by sidling up and listening to people and what they're saying, but also talking directly to the audience?
Absolutely. I think it's not just talking to the audience, it's actually watching the pattern as we've been here for longer. When we came for the first day, there were a few people here and they were meeting friends or having a coffee or something. And now we're absolutely packed. 400 plus people are coming every day. We've got regulars. I mean, we've got the Sean groupies who sit at the front. The other side of it, there are people who don't know much about Radio 3 who are just wandering in. And there was a young dad today with his pushchair and he said, "What's going on? Yes, I'd love to stay." You know, so he's their captive audience.
I was just passing by and I had to stop here. The presenter and the way he behaves, the way he acts, the way he moves. I had a completely different perception just listening.
I'm afraid all my worst sort of exhibitionistic tendencies come out. But it's great fun because I tell you, the audience are terrific. They're fascinated by the whole process of seeing radio happen. And they adore the music. And, you know, I talk to them and they are amazingly responsive.
The Gypsy Orchestra has just finished their first live performance, and now records are being played. Sean Rafferty is going through his notes, and here just to the right is the information desk. What do people want to ask you about when they come here?
We have all kinds of comments. People who are happy to see the presenters that they've only heard over the radio, happy to share their comments, happy to share their complaints as well, because it's easier to do it face to face.
What sort of complaints do you get then?
Well, people don't like the news in the breakfast show, comments about the proms and the proms programming, all sorts.
And you read them all?
Yes,
Promise?
we do. Yes,
Promise?
we do.
Okay, thank you. Do you think Radio 3 should do more of this, try and get out to its audience?
Well, to a certain extent. I mean, I know there's a lot of discussion about that, and a lot of people don't like it. I quite like the way they've become more inclusive, actually. I quite enjoy it.
So if I talk to the person who's editorial responsible for this, where in your area should I tell him to go and bring Radio 3?
Salisbury would be good.
You would like to see
in the
Radio
festival?
3? You'd like to see Radio 3 getting out?
I think I would, yeah, or in Bath. I mean, there's festivals that they could come and be part of, I suppose, in the area, or there's small things as well. Yeah, no, that would be good.
I've come into a side room off the main area to talk to Edward Blakeman, editor of BBC Radio 3 and the Proms. Edward, do you learn anything from the audience?
You learn that there are a lot of people who love Radio 3 and are hugely loyal to us. And you learn that within that loyalty, there are things they particularly love and some things they don't love and don't like. And an extended period like this, 2 weeks, we've never done this before, an extended period like this to actually interact with the audience, it's marvellous.
Of course, some people might say you haven't come very far. What is it, about 2 miles from Broadcasting House? Yes, you've had to cross the Thames to get here, but that's all. Are you going to do this elsewhere, or do you do this elsewhere throughout the country?
I think we'd love to do it again. This is the biggest we've ever done. So we do now have a studio that we can take apart and store and get out and put on a lorry and take on a longer journey next time.
Looking at the sort of correspondence we get about Radio 3, it seems to, break into two. There is the group who do not want you to change, who say your job is not to consult, your job is to play the best classical music, full stop. And then there are other people who welcome your attempts to involve them, like the conversations and the interviews and so on. Is it ever going to be possible to satisfy both of those?
I don't know, but that's what our job is about. I mean, nothing ever carries on living by standing still. And I think we feel that we must respond to a changing audience, a new audience, and hopefully not lose the audience that we have got. So hearing from a very wide range of ages and types of people during this fortnight will, I'm sure, enormously inform our thinking as we go ahead about what people are wanting and thinking about us.
What is your finale going to be, Maestro?
I
thought you'd say that.
Yeah, that means in your street the stars are brighter.
Oh, it's a romantic way to go, thank you. I think people here have just given us a sense of the importance of music making, and maybe some things that we take for granted. You realise just how it touches everybody in one way or another.
Our thanks to the Budapest Gypsy Orchestra, Sean Rafferty, Jessica Isaacs and Edward Blakeman. If you have views about the future direction of Radio 3, do let us know. You can write to us at feedback, PO Box 67234, London SE1P4AX, or you can leave a phone message on 03 333 444 544. Standard landline charges apply, but it could cost more on some mobile networks. Or, of course, you can send an email to feedback@bbc.co.uk, or you can tweet at bbcr4feedback. All those details are on our website. Now, through the magic of radio, the corporation's senior service, I'm going to transport you 6,500 miles away to the Philippines.
He says the money's in your bag.
No, hang on.
They're looking for you, no?
No, but nobody's looking for us.
Mister.
Look, back off. Huh?
A short extract from last week's 3-part radio drama, A Kidnapping, in which 2 teachers at an international school in Manila plot to kidnap the child of a corrupt politician. Many of you were captivated.
My name's Susie Cornfield, and I come from South London, and I heard the kidnapping with a few lines coming under the door of my studio where I was working, and they slithered along, and I thought, I've got to listen to this. I've got to listen to it, and I did, and I'm so glad I did. There's drama at every turn, it's taut, it's tingling, and I love the fact that they have gone to Manila to pick up the atmosphere, which they have brought back, bottled, and it's steamy and it's hot, the country, the relationship, and the kidnapping itself, and it's so thrilling.
My name is Piero Sir, I'm calling from Surbiton. I enjoyed the kidnapping a great deal. I found it incredibly realistic. The main characters were portrayed extremely convincingly, and it was incredibly sinister, so I enjoyed it very much.
I'm Stuart Evans from Margate. A kidnapping, a compelling drama, a complex moral dilemma, a sensitivity to the Philippines, a talented writer, director and cast of actors. 5 straight A's.
High praise indeed, and there was lots more of it. But others, like this listener, were less impressed.
I'm currently listening to a drama about a boy kidnapped in the Philippines by 2 English teachers. Apparently this drama was recorded in the Philippines. Surely this could have been recorded in the UK with some Filipino actors. Unnecessary expenditure that demonstrates the continued profligacy of the BBC.
My name is Michael Taylor. I'm calling from Doncaster, and I was calling about the play which the BBC Drama Department decided to take physically en masse to the Philippines. I've two problems with that. One is the amount of money that they spent. It's our licence fee money, and hearing that it's on location is like having your own money waved in your face. But I think there's something a bit more serious than that, and that's a total failure of imagination. We don't insist that this week's broadcast of Hamlet is broadcast from Elsinore in Denmark. We expect the actors to be able to convince us about the location of their place.
So why was it recorded in Manila? And was it more expensive to do it there? Questions for the play's director, John Dryden.
When we first pitched the idea to the BBC about 18 months ago, that was part of the pitch, that we'd record it in Manila. It's a story about two characters who think they know that world. It's a very sort of alien world we wanted to create. Two British characters. They think they understand it. They discover that they don't.
But do you really have to go there? I mean, Michael Taylor makes the point, if you do Hamlet, you don't have to go and record it in Elsinore.
Well, I mean, Elsinore is probably a very different place today than it was when Hamlet was set. The main reason for going there was the actors. By recording it there, we had the pick of the best Filipino actors. The cast required a large Filipino group of actors to work on it. There was going to be a lot of Tagalog improvisation, local language there. And we discovered there's relatively few Filipino actors in the UK. We would have been very limited for choice. We wanted to make Manila, a central character in the drama. We wanted to really capture the place. We wanted to reflect Manila and the people who live there in an honest and authentic way.
But can I ask you about the cost? I mean, the slot cost for a drama like this is around £18,000. That's the average amount of money. Did you get any extra money to go to Manila?
No. We have exactly the same budget that anyone else has. So we just had to make the budget work in order to do this. The costs were, in the end, very similar to doing a studio production in the UK.
Why? Because you didn't use a studio, or did it all on location in Manila?
We used the studio there for one day, but we saved a huge amount on not using drama studios. One of the aspects of working on location like this is it does take longer, and you need more time. And so the savings we made by not using a studio allowed us to work more with the actors, to spend more time recording it, to spend a lot more time in post-production.
Let's look at the sense of on-location that you got. Take this clip, for instance. Was this recorded by the sea in Manila, or was it, as it were, coded up in the studio?
Why no engine?
Nico, the uncle.
Tio, pinagla ko na.
Now it's dangerous, sir. Very dangerous.
So, John Dryden, were those effects added in the studio or got on location?
That was actually recorded in the studio. It just goes to show that this sort of debate about whether to record in studio or on location isn't of any value, really, because you can make anything recorded in the studio sound completely real.
What about this clip from the airport, then?
How many check-in luggage through?
Just this.
Put it on the scale, please.
Yeah.
Can you wait one moment, please?
Yeah.
Now, was that recorded at Manila Airport?
It was recorded on location, but not at Manila Airport. The logic of recording on location is that you have real spaces that characters can move around in, and also that you're working not with fixed mics as you would be in a traditional sort of drama studio. You're working with roving mics that follow the action. So the approach is to rehearse it and work with the actors in as realistic a way as possible so that there is real movement, and then the microphones follow the action. So if you were, for instance, recording a scene in a car and they're driving through a hectic city, there wouldn't really be any value in trying to drive a car, through the city and record the scene. You would have so many issues when you try to edit it. You would almost always, especially on a location recording drama, record it in a car without the engine. The car has a particular type of sound, even without an engine, and then add quite a lot of the street noises and stuff like that, which you could then control in post-production.
So once you'd edited the dialogue together, almost with a silent background, you then go out and get the noise to lay underneath it. So
Yes.
it stops things like somebody shouting at you from outside, a policeman stopping and blowing a whistle, a whole range of things
Absolutely,
that you might
yeah.
get. Not to say some terrifying mistake by the driver that has everybody
Absolutely.
shrieking. Yes.
Yeah, and you would then record all the wild tracks, as we call them, separately, and you would then have some control over balance.
And to put forward an ungenerous point, perhaps, it's not that you like escaping wintry England in November.
Well, it was really hard work. You know, the thing is, it does take longer recording on location. If you go to somewhere like Manila to put a production together, it's logistically very, very complex. So you're working really long hours. We're not sitting around a swimming pool drinking cocktails and things like that.
John Dryden of Goldhawk Productions, the director of the Radio 4 drama A Kidnapping. Now, 20 years ago this week, a new radio station was born. The first voice on air was then a virtual unknown.
Good morning. Welcome to a new network, Radio 5 Live, news and sport from the BBC, 24 hours a day. It's 5 o'clock on Monday, the 28th of March. I'm Jane Garvey, and this is Morning Report.
The inimitable Jane Garvey. Now, it's fair to say that in the beginning, the idea of a 24-hour rolling news and sports station on medium wave didn't meet with universal approval. Even the BBC's then head of news, the yet-to-be-ennobled Tony Hall, seemed happy to accept it wouldn't be an immediate success.
The BBC's Managing Director of News and Current Affairs, Tony Hall, was assuring journalists they'd find 5 Live compulsive listening.
It'll grow on people, and they'll wonder how on earth they lived without it.
Do you wonder that now? Well, 20 years on, Jane Garvey is now a mainstay of Radio 4, but her one-time sidekick, Peter Allen, who presented the breakfast show on that first day, is still going strong on 5 Live, having survived the move to Salford. Though perhaps in deference to his age, he has been allowed a lie-in nowadays and moved from breakfast to the more civilised hours of the afternoon drive programme. This week, however, he's been jumping around the schedule, presenting all the daytime strands, and reuniting for one night, or rather early evening only, with Jane Garvey on Drive. I asked him what his memories were of their first on-air morning together.
Fright, I remember.
Of going on air or being with her?
No, not being with Jane. Jane and I had a kind of... it was almost like a radio marriage, really. We bickered quite a lot. We were certainly antagonistic at times on air, but actually there was a kind of, I think, a mutual affection underneath. At least I like to think there was. And no, it was actually just because it was a live radio programme and the first of a new station. And although I'd been a journalist for so many years, radio and television and newspapers, I'd never done anything quite like that. And I remember coming out of the studio feeling as if I'd been sandbagged. But over the years, it's got slightly easier.
When you started, though, I mean, was there a real prospect of failure, do you think? Did you think immediately in the run-up and the first programme, this is a great big success? Or did you think,
well,
sure?
I think one or two of our management thought, I'm not sure, because it wasn't really as a result of some inspirational thinking in a management team that we emerged with that particular conversational sort of style. To believe it or not, I think it just happened. There was an editor called Billy Rogers we had who shoved us all together for a pilot programme, and he just liked the sound of it. It was at that stage quite a bit like a bear garden. It was sometimes a bit fragmented with lots of voices bursting in, and it was sometimes a bit clumsy.
Of course, some people gave it the Radio Bloke tag, didn't they?
They did indeed. In fact, I had a T-shirt printed at one stage with the emblem Radio Bloke. I've never fought against it much. I think it's probably slightly wrong, but certainly it was radio conversational. That's where I do genuinely believe that radio in the end is just conversation, and that like any good conversation, it should have in it something you haven't heard before, expressed with a bit of wit or humour, ideally, sharply, pithily, and ideally, I think Jane and I work because, in the words of one critic, Jane and Peter are in conversation with each other and with the listener, and that's about it, really. I mean, that is the essence of what we were trying to do.
Now, you were on the air when the news came through that Diana, Princess of Wales, have died.
It was an extraordinary story, that one, actually, because it kind of seized the imagination of the country in a way I don't think I've ever heard anything else do, not even in 20 years. We've had stories of more international importance, obviously, but that one somehow just gripped everybody, and I'm afraid the professional response is mostly, wow, what a story. I'm going to be honest about this. Of course it was sad, but really as a journalist, I just kept thinking, good Lord. In fact, I was part of a special programme on that particular occasion because James Naughtie and I did a kind of all networks broadcast, and actually, being equally honest, I have a feeling that when Jane Garvey woke up in Wales and heard me say, this is Peter Allen on radios 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, she probably thought, damn it, I'm not in London.
Yeah, I mean, the few times I've done something which is not remotely comparable, but with something highly emotional, it is strange. You have a delayed reaction, almost delayed shock.
Yeah, well, I think there are plenty of times when I find myself breaking up even on air, and clearly that was intensely sad. But there are moments when you talk to people that you do find yourself emotionally deeply involved and indeed sometimes unable to carry on speaking. And I'll tell you the most affecting of all that. I spoke to a man once in America who'd been in the Twin Towers and who'd been grievously injured. And it was just after Osama bin Laden had been killed. And I said, are you pleased that he's dead? And he just said in a croaky voice, because he was so badly damaged, no more killing, no more killing. I don't want anyone to die. I find people who can forgive, whether it's on the international stage like Nelson Mandela or on that personal level, really, truly affecting. There are occasions, I must admit, when I do an interview and find I'm crying as I do it. And nothing wrong with that. You should have a certain amount of empathy with those you're talking to, I guess.
And looking at 5 Live, 20 years on, has the move to Salford changed it? Is it a significantly different network now from the one that you started?
Not yet. There are real difficulties about coming to Salford, I won't pretend, because obviously for presenters and journalists it's difficult. Your whole career has been shaped towards getting to London. But 5 Live and the BBC are supposed to represent, not just cover the nation, but come from the nation. And I think actually it's quite extremely important that we're up here in Salford and that a large part of the BBC is coming from Salford. As to whether it will change, I think it will. But remember, I think that 5 Live kind of emerged. You throw the bits into the pot and you see what comes out. And because we're no longer in London and because we're a voice of people outside London, I think it will gradually take on a different tone. I won't be surprised in future years if it becomes the voice of the dispossessed and the have-nots. I think really that might well be 5 Live's role. It'll take a year or two because you'll find different people will come into the station, different presenters will take over, and a different voice will emerge. But I do genuinely believe that might happen.
Peter Allen, a mere whippersnapper at the tender age of 68, the perfect age for a radio presenter. And, just before we go, a chance to hear again one of our favourite moments from 20 years of 5 Live. It stars Sheila Fogarty and, well, have a listen.
Oh, my God! Oh! How horrible! Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. I'm live on the radio squealing and saying how horrible and kneeling on my chair because there's a mouse in the room. Oh, no. I don't want to carry on doing this programme. Please somebody get rid of the mouse. If it walks on my hand, I'm resigning.
Goodbye.
And they haven't said that. So what we're getting is nothing from them, whereas we are in the budget. It's very important. But, Devon, you didn't ask this question to her earlier. It is very, very important.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm David Osgood from Gloucestershire. Today is an excellent programme and has some excellent presenters. But why does Evan Davis have to be so interruptive in his interviewing?
I'm trying to understand. Well, let me give you an example. Well, let me take my example. Let me ask you my example.
I know his hobby horse is finance, but he is not the plenipotentiary of all solvable problems. Why do editors not give him some advice on his repeatedly interruptive style?
Well, David, we'll try to find out the answer to that and many other listeners' questions in a few weeks' time, when today's editor, Jamie Angus, comes on to feedback. In the meantime,
him in a blaze of publicity.
5 Live is 20 years old this week, and though Eddie Mair has moved away to Radio 4, Peter Allen, another member of the original presenting team, has never left. He joins us with his recollections of working at the UK's first 24-hour rolling news and sports station.
Though I'd been a journalist for so many years, radio and television and newspapers, I'd never done anything quite like that. And I remember coming out of the studio feeling as if I'd been sandbagged.
And as its controller announces he's sailing off into the sunset, we join Radio 3 down by the riverside to discover why the station set up a pop-up studio on the south bank of the Thames.
It's going to be quite strange going back to a lonely studio in Broadcasting House. I shall have to bring some of these very nice audience members with me.
More from... This is a download from the BBC. To find out more and for our terms of use, please go to bbc.co.uk. Hello. This week, the thriller in Manila. The radio drama A Kidnapping captured the approval of many listeners. But did it have to be recorded in the Philippines, and at what cost?
It's our licence fee money, and hearing that it's on location is like having your own money waved in your face.
The play's director, John Dryden, tries to convince sceptical listeners that recording in far-flung locations can make artistic and financial sense. Also...
Now, just in case you hadn't realised it, you're listening to 5 Live, the BBC's 24-hour national news and sport network. Launched at 5 this morning.
I want to register my strong objections to the increasing trend of interviewers to what I can only describe as pouncing on politicians' replies to questions mid-sentence, as evidenced in Evan Davies' interview with Iain Duncan Smith on the Today programme on Wednesday.
Government said they were controlling
welfare, saying there's a cap,
and it
ballooned
in fact
by
you're
70%,
saying that the first, but the public were told...
I hold no brief for politicians, but by constantly pouncing, it was made almost impossible to hear what was being said by either.
I believe we will,
Would you
but we
under
need to do it in a way that the policies we put forward
Sus.
actually do it.
So frustrating. Would you do it?
I'm Jill Beckett and I'm from Mirfield in West Yorkshire. Evan was constantly interrupting and both were talking at the same time. What a dreadful way to conduct a serious interview.
Sean Rafferty et al. Later. But first, the unarmed combat. That is, a Today programme political interview.
You're saying there's a cap, but
limit.
Actually the government can change the cap as soon as it wants
the rules
by
are,
simply
if
getting
you want
a vote of its
to,
majority
if you want
in the
to
House
change
of
it,
you have to get a vote of your MPs, which is obviously
that's
not
in the
very
rules,
difficult.
and we don't want to do that.
Now, politicians who go on the Today programme know that they're unlikely to be given an easy ride, let alone take a breath. The programme prides itself on its presenters' rigorous and robust interviewing style. But for many listeners, Evan Davies' interview with the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Iain Duncan Smith, on Wednesday went way over the top. They want a lot less heat and a lot more light.
It's David Morse. I'm calling from Ham Island in Shepperton.